It was Benjamin Franklin who first started the phrase, "You can't escape death and taxes." He said it a little differently, but basically that's what it meant. Well, when you're doing genealogy, one of the best ways to find your dead is through their taxes. So today we're going to talk a little bit about taxes and how valuable they are in your family history research, because you need to know about tax records. It's something that a lot of people don't use. They can be difficult to find, and most of them are not indexed, although that is changing. And so I'm going to tell you why you want to know about taxes, where you can find them, and help you get a start on this valuable resource. But let's first talk about why. Why do taxes even matter? Why would you even care? Well, like census records, taxes put somebody in a particular place and time. And depending on what was taxed in that particular area, they can also tell you a lot about your person that you're looking at. So why would you even want to bother, especially looking through papers and papers of something if they're not indexed? It's going to take time, granted, okay? Tax records are not a super quick find, but because they're so well worth it, there's something that you want to definitely invest a little bit of time in, particularly when you're doing research in the 1800s and 1700s. In the United States is really what I'm talking about here. Now, taxes do apply to everywhere else because nobody escapes taxes. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter what country you reside. The Romans taxed, everybody taxes, right? So tax records are a valuable resource. Now, my whys for collecting tax records, some of them may pertain to the United States, but some of them would apply really anywhere. My recommended resources for obtaining those tax records, I'm going to be upfront, those are going to apply mostly to the United States because that's what I'm familiar with. But hopefully this will still give you some good suggestions on places that you can find tax records regardless of what country that you're searching in. So, all right, let's talk about why. In the United States, census records did not begin until 1790. That was our first census. And the 1890 census was lost. And so we have a 20-year gap where we have no census record. On top of that, sometimes you really need to know what happened to a family in between two census records. Maybe you have them in 1850 and you have them in 1860, but all of a sudden the dad has disappeared. One of the older sons, we're not sure where he is. Taxes can sometimes provide that information. And they can also tell you when somebody may have relocated. When was the first year they were taxed in a particular area? So that can be super helpful. One of the other things that is really helpful is a census record may have missed a family, but the tax man, he wasn't so good at missing people. He was really good at tracking people down. So you may have a family that is not found in a census record, but is found in a tax record. Now, there's a couple of other valuable things that censuses can tell you. One, if you're doing research on a woman may be taxed if she owned property, whereas in some of these time periods, it's really difficult to find women in records. So that is something that you definitely want to check for. Plus, it clues you into other records. If you find a woman in a tax record, you know she had property. So now you need to look for the property. A couple of other things that are really helpful that you can find in tax records. If somebody owned a business, the information about the business may be in the tax record, information that could be really helpful to you, not only in doing research, but to learn more about your ancestor. And then finally, the other thing that tax records provide, which is really helpful, is information about the family. Now, a tax record is going to ask about property that's owned. It's going to ask about real property, meaning real estate, and personal property, meaning possessions, okay? And that includes horses, cattle, it can include sheep. It kind of depends on the particular tax record. But the other thing that it includes is the number of enslaved individuals. And that's really helpful if you're of African American descent and you want to find out whether or not a particular person owned slaves. If you're of African American descent, you need to know the name of the enslaver because that's who's going to have the records that you care about. A tax record can also state an occupation. Some of them do, some of them don't. They'll usually tell you the males in the household that are of legal age. And the reason that comes up is that many places during this time period had a poll tax. Now, a poll tax was a tax provided for males between the age of somewhere between 16 and 21. It depended on the law of that particular state and that particular time, up until like maybe 50 or 60. And then they kind of aged out of having to pay that poll tax. Judy Russell is famous for saying, if we want to understand the records, we've got to understand the law. So it's really helpful to know the laws that pertained to the particular area that you're researching. But a poll tax is really valuable because it can help you see somebody's age over a period of time. So let me give you an example. In this project that I had done for a client, Richard Cheney was in the 1858 tax record, and underneath him, under his same taxpayer ID number, he was taxpayer ID 100, was FM Cheney. And Richard did not have to pay the poll tax, but FM did. So that indicates that Richard was maybe over 60, depending on the rules at that particular time in that location. FM Cheney is of taxable age, so he's probably over the age of 21. So that can give you some great information. And when we're doing research in the early 1800s and late 1700s, it's little facts like this that can make a case for something, because things just aren't that easily found. You have to use this kind of information. Now, the Family Search Wiki has a great page on taxation with links to the various states and additional information on that. And I'm going to put that link in the video description down below, but here it is right here as well. Now, that's really helpful because, like we were talking about, states differed, and you need to understand what is available. And one of the problems with these tax records is sometimes they have not been retained over time, and they don't exist anymore. But Family Search is always the first place I go to find those records, and the Family Search Wiki really helps me see not only does what Family Search holds, but what other people hold as well. The federal government directly taxed citizens in 1798, 1814 to 1816, and then from 1862 to 1866. But states also levied taxes. So you want to be paying attention to all those kinds of details. Now, where can you find these records? The first place that I mentioned before that I always start with is Family Search. I always go there first. Ancestry has a lot of tax records now as well. And some of those records you're going to find with a general search. They're going to come up as a record. But sometimes you may have to look through their catalog for tax records. If you go to the Ancestry catalog and under the title field, just put the word tax, you'll see all of the different tax records that they have. You can get more specific if you want to. But sometimes with that catalog, less is more. So kind of keep that in mind. You can also go straight to this U.S. IRS tax assessment list. It's good from 1862 to 1918, but they also have records from other countries as well. So really dive into the records that are available. So those are my first two places I would tell you to go. Family Search and Ancestry. Now on Family Search, the general databases may not be quite as effective. I would search in the catalog by location instead. A couple of other places that you want to take a look at. Look at MyHeritage, take a look at Find My Past. And again, remember, Find My Past has a lot of British records, but they also have records for the colonies, right? Before we became the United States. And if you're researching in England, you might find some great records there as well. So Find My Past is a great resource. One of the other places that you can go is to the Internet Archive. That's in the United States. And then finally, if you're looking in the New England area, don't miss American Ancestors. That's a site that a lot of people don't know about. There is a fee associated with it, but it is free in a lot of libraries, and it is free in the Family Search libraries throughout the world. Now that website is great. It's got a lot of records pertaining to early America, and you can find some tax records there. And then finally, the county and the state. And in the Northeast, sometimes those records were held in the township level. So you may want to reach out to those individual places to see if they have additional tax records. Now, some hints on these tax records. First off, they can be really difficult to read. Some of them have been damaged. The print is just very difficult to read, but sometimes it's the handwriting. The handwriting is difficult to read. And they oftentimes used abbreviations or just initials in those tax records. So you have to kind of be thorough. Sometimes the tax records are listed alphabetically. And that has an advantage in that if you're looking for a particular surname, you're going to see all the people in that one particular area in a grouping. Now remember, the tax records are not going to be as general as the census records. So the tax records may be for just one township. And then within the same county of tax records, you're going to see another township. So you have to be really thorough when looking at those records. But sometimes those tax records are not done alphabetically. They're done kind of in order of the tax assessor going around and talking to people. That can also provide you some hints as to maybe who resided by one another, like we do in census records. So that can be helpful in a different way. And then finally, a lot of times in those tax assessor columns, you don't know what the different things mean. The heading of the columns wasn't carried over page to page. So you want to look through that whole book. You want to go to the beginning of the book. In Ancestry, that can be a little bit more difficult sometimes, and that can be kind of frustrating. But you want to be looking around that book and looking for the information as to what is contained in that tax book, what every one of those columns mean, because they're important. It's more than just finding the name. You want to understand what's in those columns. You want to understand what it means. Now, what do I do with them? The first thing that I do is I put them in a table timeline. I'll create a table and I'll put different headings in that table where I'll talk about the different names that I'm finding and the time periods and where they were located and what information. And it's through tables like that that can really make a big difference. Here's a table that I created for a client that kind of shows you who is listed in this table, who was paying tax in a particular time period, when they showed up, and I was trying to provide relationships. And one of the other things that this table showed is that when a guy died, his wife picked up the tax. And the way that I knew it was his wife was because the property was described identically or relatively so. And then when I went in and looked at deeds, then she was listed as his wife. So tax records can really solve a lot of genealogy problems. So don't miss them. So good luck as you dive into tax records. Tell me all about what you find and the successes you have found through tax records. Put those in the comments and like this video if it's of help to you. Then Google knows that this is a helpful video and it will show it to other people too. I hope you have a great day. Thanks so much for watching. And I hope these videos will help you out.